Operation Blackout by Jasper Hawke. Chapter 1. The Briefing. Zurich, Switzerland, safe house, 2:45 hours. The rain drummed against the window pane in steady, rhythmic beats as Jasper Hawke sat in a dimly lit room, staring at the classified dossier in front of him. A single desk lamp cast shadows over the documents, photographs, intelligence reports, and last known locations of the target. The rogue agent's name was Elias Costa, a man Hawke once considered an ally. Costa had vanished 6 months ago after a covert mission in Eastern Europe went sideways. The official report stated he had gone off the grid, but intelligence chatter suggested otherwise. He hadn't disappeared, he had defected, and now Hawke had been sent to track him down. A sharp knock at the door broke his focus. He placed his hand instinctively near the silenced pistol resting on the table. A second knock, 3 beats this time. The signal was correct. Hawke stood and opened the door just enough to see the man outside. Gray hair, cold eyes, a face weathered by years in the field. "Langley's not happy, Hawke," said Victor Kane, his handler. He stepped inside, shaking rain from his coat. "Costa's gone dark, and you know what that means. We need this done quietly." Hawke gestured toward the folder. "I assume this is all you have?" "For now," Kane said, pulling a chair. "Costa was last seen in Belgrade, meeting with an arms dealer tied to a black market weapons syndicate. We have reason to believe he's brokering a deal." Hawke flipped through the files. Satellite images, a grainy photo of Costa in a crowded marketplace. He was moving, always one step ahead. "Authorization?" Hawke asked. Kane hesitated before sliding a small encrypted drive across the table. "Full discretion. Off the books. No backup." Hawke nodded. He was used to working alone. "Where do I start?" Kane exhaled. "We have an asset in Belgrade, a fixer named Nadia Petrova. She can get you inside the network." He paused. "Hawke, listen to me. If Costa really has switched sides, we need confirmation before you pull the trigger." Hawke's jaw tightened. "I don't miss. See that you don't." Kane stood, pulling his coat tighter around him. "Your flight leaves in an hour. We'll arrange an extraction when the job's done. Until then, you're on your own." Hawke watched him leave before turning back to the files. His instincts told him something wasn't right. A simple elimination job? No, it was never that simple. Hawke packed his gear, his mind already racing ahead. The hunt had begun. Chapter 2. Into the Fire. Belgrade, Serbia, 23:10 hours. The city sprawled before him like a labyrinth of dimly lit streets and ancient buildings, where shadows stretched long and danger lurked in every corner. Jasper Hawke adjusted his collar as he stepped off the train at Belgrade Central Station, blending into the late-night crowd. The mission was simple on paper: find Nadia Petrova, confirm Elias Costa's allegiance, and eliminate him if necessary. But Hawke knew better than to trust simplicity. Nothing in his line of work was ever simple. A black sedan idled at the curb. Hawke scanned the driver, a wiry man with a scar above his left eye, tapping his fingers against the steering wheel. Hawke slid into the passenger seat without a word. "You're early?" the driver muttered in Serbian-accented English. "I don't like being late," Hawke replied. The driver smirked, pulled into traffic, and handed Hawke an untraceable phone. "Petrova says to meet her at a bar called the Black Swan. She'll make contact there." Security? Hawke asked. The driver shrugged. It's a den for criminals and spies. Everyone carries a weapon. Hawke pocketed the phone and leaned back. This was going to be fun. The Black Swan, 23:45 hours. The bar smelled of cheap whiskey, cigarette smoke, and bad decisions. Low lighting masked the faces of patrons who had no interest in being recognized. Hawke stepped inside, scanning the room. A woman sat alone in a booth at the back. Nadia Petrova. She had raven black hair, sharp green eyes, and the posture of someone who had seen too much but let nothing slip. A former intelligence asset, she knew the game well. Hawke approached, slid into the seat opposite her. "You're late," she murmured, sipping her drink. "Good things take time," Hawke replied. She smirked, then leaned in. "Word is you're hunting Costa. You have a lead?" She exhaled, glancing around before slipping a flash drive into his hand. "He's meeting with an arms dealer tomorrow night. Warehouse, District 11. Hawke's eyes narrowed. "And you trust this intel?" She leaned closer. "I trust nothing in this city. But if Costa is selling secrets, you need to move fast." Hawke tapped his fingers against the table, considering. "You're in deep on this. Why help me?" She smiled faintly. "Because if Costa lives, I die." Hawke met her gaze. "Fair enough." A sudden shift in the bar's atmosphere sent his instincts flaring. The door opened, and two men entered, hard eyes, military stance, armed under their jackets. Nadia whispered, "We need to leave. Now." Hawke didn't hesitate. He slid out of the booth, pulling Nadia with him, just as the first man reached for his weapon. The night had just turned deadly. Chapter 3. No Way Out. The Black Swan, 23:50 hours. Jasper Hawke moved fast, pulling Nadia Petrova along as the two armed men zeroed in on their table. A fight here would be messy. He preferred to avoid unnecessary bloodshed, but the moment the first man reached under his jacket, the decision was made for him. Hawke reacted instinctively. One step forward, one precise movement. His left hand clamped down on the man's wrist, stopping him from drawing his weapon, while his right drove a sharp elbow into his throat. The man gagged, staggering backward. The second attacker went for his gun. Too slow. Hawke grabbed the first man's arm, twisted his body, and used him as a human shield. The second man hesitated just a fraction of a second, long enough for Hawke to slam his foot into his knee, sending him crashing into a table. Chaos erupted. Chairs scraped, bottles shattered, and the low murmur of conversation exploded into shouts. "Go!" Hawke barked at Nadia. She didn't hesitate, moving fast toward the back exit. Hawke followed, but the first man, still coughing, managed to pull a knife. Bad move. Hawke grabbed the man's wrist and twisted hard, forcing the blade loose before slamming his knee into his ribs. The attacker crumpled. Hawke retrieved the knife, pocketed it, and bolted after Nadia. Alleyway behind the Black Swan, 23:55 hours. The cold air hit them as they emerged into a dimly lit alley. Footsteps thundered behind them. More men, closing fast. "Where's your car?" Hawke asked, scanning their surroundings. "2 streets over," Nadia panted. "Too far." A black SUV screeched to a stop at the alley's entrance, blocking their escape. Hawke cursed. They had backup. Nadia's hand went to the pistol hidden in her coat, but Hawke grabbed her wrist. "Too many eyes," he muttered. "We disappear, not fight." A rusted fire escape zigzagged up the side of the building. Without a word, he grabbed the bottom rung and pulled himself up. Nadia followed, moving quickly despite the slippery metal. Below, the men shouted, then gunfire erupted, bullets tearing into the bricks just inches from their feet. "Move," Hawke ordered. They reached the rooftop and sprinted across, vaulting over ventilation units and antennas. The sound of men climbing after them echoed in the night. "Jump," Hawke ordered, pointing to the next rooftop. Nadia hesitated only for a second before leaping. Hawke followed, landing in a crouch just as more bullets ripped through the AI. No good. Too exposed. A rooftop door stood slightly open. An exit. Hawke shoved it wide, dragging Nadia inside. Abandoned building 005 hours. They moved fast through the darkened stairwell. Hawke counted the floors. For levels down, they'd be street-side. "Who were they?" Nadia whispered, keeping her gun ready. "No idea, but they were here for us." As they reached the ground floor, Hawke slowed. Something felt off. The door leading to the street was slightly ajar. A trap. He pulled Nadia back against the wall just as a silencer coughed. A bullet embedding itself in the door frame where his head had been. "Damn," Nadia whispered. Hawke signaled for her to stay low. One shooter, maybe two. They were professionals, waiting, forcing him to make the first move. Hawke retrieved the knife he'd taken earlier. A crude weapon against a gun, but in the right hands, deadly. He moved fast, pushing the door open just enough to slide through the gap. A man stood near a parked car, weapon raised. Hawke didn't give him a chance. He closed the distance in 3 strides, grabbing the gunman's wrist and yanking him forward. The knife slashed across his forearm, making him drop the silenced pistol. The second shooter reacted, but too late. Hawke spun the wounded man around, using him as a shield. A suppressed shot fired, hitting the attacker in the chest instead of Hawke. The second shooter hesitated. Hawke didn't. He lunged, ramming the knife under the man's ribcage. The attacker went down without a sound. Silence. Hawke exhaled and retrieved one of the silenced pistols. Now he was armed. "Clear," he called to Nadia. She slipped out, eyes scanning. "They were waiting," she murmured. "Someone knew we'd come this way." Hawke nodded grimly. That meant one thing. "Someone in your network sold us out." Nadia's expression darkened. "And now," Hawke said, checking the stolen pistol, "we find out who." Chapter 4. A web of lies. Safe house. 1:15 hours. The tension inside the safe house was thick. The room was dimly lit, a single bulb swaying gently from the ceiling, casting shifting shadows along the cracked walls. The air smelled of old wood and cigarette smoke. A forgotten place, ideal for ghosts like them. Jasper Hawke stood by the window, his gaze locked onto the street below. He hadn't spotted a tail, but instinct told him they weren't out of danger yet. Across the room, Nadia Petrova sat on an old wooden chair, her face illuminated by the glow of a laptop screen. "Anything?" Hawke asked without turning. Nadia exhaled sharply. "Nothing yet. Whoever is behind this, they've covered their tracks well." She'd been combing through an encrypted database, searching for any sign of who had compromised them. The Black Swan attack hadn't been random. They had been expected. Hawke's fingers drummed against the windowsill. Someone inside your network knew we were coming, he said. A leak. Nadia looked up. And it has to be someone high up. This kind of coordination isn't street level. Hawke finally turned to face her. Then we start at the top. Vienna, Austria, 3:45 hours. The cold wind howled through the narrow streets, sweeping against the towering facades of Vienna's old town. The city was sleeping, except for those who operated in the shadows. Hawke and Nadia moved with precision, cutting through alleyways and deserted streets until they reached a quiet cafe. Closed for the night, but still occupied. Inside, a man sat alone at a corner booth, his face half hidden behind a newspaper. He was older, late 50s, with thinning hair and an angular jaw. Viktor Kozlov, a high-ranking intelligence officer with ties to multiple agencies. As Hawke and Nadia entered, Kozlov didn't flinch. He turned the page of his newspaper as if expecting them. Mr. Hawke, Miss Petrova. He set the paper down and folded his hands. You're late. Hawke slid into the seat opposite him, Nadia taking position beside him. You were expecting us, Hawke said. Kozlov smiled faintly. I expect many things. Only some come true. Nadia didn't waste time. Who sold us out? Kozlov sighed, leaning back. Straight to business. You're both in a difficult position. Your enemies know you're alive, and they won't make the same mistake twice. Hawke studied him. Which enemies? Kozlov gave a small chuckle. Ah, you assume there is just one. That's your first mistake. Nadia's patience thinned. Enough games, Kozlov. Who? The older man's expression sobered. Your name was flagged on a classified channel 2 days ago, Petrova. Right before your mission to meet Hawke. Hawke's muscles tensed. Classified by whom? Kozlov exhaled. Your own people, Nadia. Silence. Nadia didn't move, but Hawke could see it. The shift in her eyes, the calculation of betrayal sinking in. My people wouldn't do that, she said, but there was a thin edge to her voice. Kozlov slid a small flash drive across the table. Your people already did. That drive has the encrypted order logs. If you want answers, start there. Hawke picked it up. Why are you helping us? Kozlov gave him a knowing look. Because I know what's coming, Mr. Hawke, and I prefer to stay on the winning side. Before either of them could respond, the cafe's front door swung open. A gust of wind rushed inside, and with it, 2 men in dark coats. Kozlov's face paled. Move. Now. The chase, for a clock hours. The first gunshot shattered the cafe's window. Hawke flipped the table, using it as cover as he grabbed Nadia's wrist. Out the back. Kozlov reached for his weapon, but the assassins were too fast. 2 suppressed shots. Kozlov slumped forward, dead. Hawke and Nadia bolted for the kitchen, dodging another round of fire. They crashed through the back door, sprinting down a narrow alley. The sharp sound of footsteps echoed behind them. Their pursuers were fast. Hawke spotted an old delivery truck parked by a loading dock. Unattended. Unlocked. In. He yanked the door open, shoving Nadia inside before climbing in himself. The engine roared to life just as bullets sprayed across the windshield. Hawke slammed the gas, tires screeching against the pavement as they sped away. Behind them, The assassins vanished into the night. A new target, 4:20 hours. Inside the truck, Nadia inserted Koslov's flash drive into her laptop. Lines of encrypted text filled the screen. Got it. She worked quickly, fingers flying over the keyboard. It's a set of classified orders, issued under my name. Hawke glanced at her. Someone inside your agency wanted you compromised. Nadia's jaw tightened. And now we find out who. The laptop screen blinked, revealing an authorizing signature. A name. Nadia's face darkened. Hawke read the name aloud. Anton Gregorov, a name tied to intelligence agencies, assassinations, and high-level betrayals. A name that meant one thing. This mission just got personal. Chapter 5. A Traitor's Mark. Vienna Safe House, 5:10 hours. The room was silent except for the rhythmic tapping of Nadia Petrova's fingers against the keyboard. The glow from the laptop screen illuminated her sharp features, her brows furrowed in concentration. Across from her, Jasper Hawke sat in the dimly lit corner, his Beretta lying on the table between them. His gaze never left the door. Old habits. Anton Gregorov. The name on the encrypted orders. A name that carried weight. Hawke had encountered Gregorov once before. A ghost in the intelligence world. A man rumored to have orchestrated high-level defections, double crosses, and political assassinations. A specialist in betrayal. If Gregorov had signed the order to eliminate Nadia, it meant one thing. This mission wasn't just about a rogue agent anymore. It was about control, power, and erasing those who knew too much. Nadia let out a slow breath. I've decrypted part of the file. Hawke leaned forward. What's in it? Nadia clicked on an attachment. A photograph loaded onto the screen. A grainy surveillance image. Two men shaking hands in a private room. Hawke's stomach tensed. One of the men was Anton Gregorov. The other was Director Philip Keaton. A dangerous alliance. Hawke didn't speak for a moment. Keaton was his superior at the agency, the man who had sent him into this mission. Now it looked like Keaton had been playing both sides. Nadia exhaled. Your own people are in on this. Hawke's expression was unreadable. Not my people. Just one man. Nadia studied him. You don't look surprised. I'm not. Hawke's voice was flat. Keaton always played too many angles. I just never thought he'd go this far. Nadia turned the laptop toward him. There's more. This wasn't just about me. Gregorov and Keaton were negotiating a data exchange. Classified intelligence. Hawke narrowed his eyes. What kind of intelligence? Nadia hesitated. Then she clicked on another file. A shipment manifest appeared. Hawke scanned the details. Encryption codes. Satellite access keys. Nuclear defense protocols. His pulse quickened. They're selling access to critical defense networks. Nadia's voice was quiet. To who? Hawke's mind worked fast. Whoever pays the most. This isn't just corruption. This is treason. Silence hung between them. Then Hawke stood, pocketing his Beretta. His voice was calm, but there was an edge of finality in it. We're shutting them down. The meeting point, 6:45 hours. The abandoned train yard on the outskirts of Vienna was silent, the early morning mist curling around rusted tracks and forgotten freight containers. Hawke and Nadia moved like shadows, keeping low. Keaton's due here in 10 minutes, Nadia murmured, checking the suppressed Glock in her grip. Hawke nodded. We let him make contact. Then we get the proof we need. They positioned themselves on an elevated catwalk, overlooking a row of shipping containers. Below, a black SUV pulled up. A tall figure stepped out. Director Keaton. He checked his watch, then reached for his phone. Moments later, a second car arrived. The passenger door opened, and Anton Gregorov stepped into the dim light. Nadia tensed. That's him. Hawke's grip tightened on his weapon. Showtime. Below, Keaton and Gregorov exchanged a brief handshake. Then Keaton handed over a silver briefcase. Payment? Nadia whispered. Gregorov opened the case, nodding in approval. Then he passed Keaton a USB drive. That's the data, Hawke murmured. Keaton slipped the drive into his pocket. Pleasure doing business, he said aloud. Gregorov smirked. Let's hope no one interferes. Nadia glanced at Hawke. Now? Hawke didn't respond. He was already moving. The ambush. Hawke dropped down from the catwalk, landing behind a stack of crates. He moved swiftly, pistol raised. Hands where I can see them. Keaton and Gregorov spun toward the voice. Hawke stepped into the open, gun trained on Keaton. Jasper. Keaton's voice was calm, but his fingers twitched toward his jacket. Don't. Hawke's tone was ice. That USB drive. Hand it over. Gregorov smirked. I was wondering when you'd show up. Keaton's jaw clenched. Jasper, you don't understand. I understand enough. Hawke cut him off. You've been working with Gregorov, selling classified intel, and framing Nadia to clean up your mess. Keaton exhaled. You always were too smart for your own good. Then, in one quick motion, he reached for his gun. Too slow. Hawke fired. The shot struck Keaton in the shoulder, sending him staggering backward. Nadia moved in from the shadows. Gun raised. Gregorov didn't flinch. You think killing him will solve this? He smiled. There are others. This goes deeper than you know. Hawke's jaw tightened. Then I'll dig deeper. Gregorov held up his hands. Let me go. I can give you information. The real players. Hawke didn't blink. I don't make deals. Gregorov's smirk vanished. Then he moved. His hand shot inside his coat. Hawke didn't hesitate. Point two shots. Gregorov collapsed. Keaton groaned, clutching his wounded shoulder. You don't know what you've done. Hawke loomed over him. I know exactly what I've done. He reached down and grabbed the USB drive from Keaton's pocket. Then he turned to Nadia. We're leaving. Nadia hesitated, then nodded. Keaton gasped from the ground. This won't end here. Hawke stared down at him. It never does. Then he and Nadia disappeared into the night. Chapter 6. No safe harbor. Vienna, 7:30 hours. The city was waking up, but for Jasper Hawke and Nadia Petrova, the night's shadows still clung to them. They moved quickly through the back streets, staying clear of main roads and security cameras. Hawke's grip tightened on the USB drive in his pocket. The data inside was the key to unraveling a deep conspiracy, one that had already cost lives. They needed to disappear, fast. Nadia checked their 6. Keaton will put the whole agency on us the moment he makes a call. Hawke gave a short nod, which is why we have to move before he does. He pulled out a burner phone and dialed a secure line. A gravelly voice answered. "This is Bishop." Hawke didn't waste time. "I need an exit." A pause. Then, "Vienna's too hot. You'll need to reach Prague. I can set up an exfil from there." Hawke exhaled. Prague was nearly 300 kilometers away. "Copy that," he said. "I'll make it work." The line went dead. Nadia raised an eyebrow. "Prague?" Hawke pocketed the phone. "We need transport." The pursuit begins. They ditched their safe house within minutes. Hawke led them through the maze-like backstreets of Vienna, careful not to double back or stay in one place too long. They needed a car, one that wasn't traced. "Public transport?" Nadia suggested. Hawke shook his head. "Too many cameras. We steal a ride." 5 minutes later, they found what they needed. A dark sedan parked on a quiet side street. Hawke jimmied the lock while Nadia kept watch. Within seconds, the engine roared to life as they pulled onto the road. Nadia glanced at the rearview mirror. "We should be clear for now." Hawke didn't reply. He had learned long ago you were never clear. The trap. They had barely crossed into the outskirts of Vienna when Hawke's instincts flared. "Something's wrong," he muttered. Nadia looked up. "What?" Hawke's grip on the wheel tightened. "We're being funneled." She glanced around, confused. Then, she saw it. Ahead, a black SUV idled at an intersection. The driver wasn't looking at the road, he was watching them. Nadia turned, scanning behind them. A motorcycle had just merged into their lane. Then another. Hawke's jaw clenched. "They're boxing us in." Nadia reached for her weapon. "How do you want to play this?" Hawke's eyes flicked between the rearview mirror and the road ahead. The SUV wasn't moving, waiting for them to pass so it could close them in. He made his decision. "Hold on." Breaking the box, Hawke slammed the accelerator. The stolen sedan lurched forward, tires screeching as he aimed straight for the intersection. The SUV's driver reacted a second too late. Hawke cut the wheel hard, veering off the road and onto a narrow side street. The two motorcycles reacted instantly, engines roaring as they gave chase. Hawke swerved through the tight alleyways, barely missing parked cars. Nadia leaned out the window, gun in hand. Bang, bang. The first rider swerved, losing control. He clipped a trash bin and spun out, crashing hard. The second biker wasn't deterred. He accelerated, pulling up alongside them, one hand reaching for a weapon. Nadia fired again. .1 shot. The biker jerked sideways and tumbled from the bike, skidding across the pavement. Hawke didn't slow down. They burst out of the alley onto a main road, leaving the wreckage behind them. "The border plan. We can't keep this up," Nadia said, catching her breath. Hawke nodded. "Agreed. We need a new ride." He drove another 15 minutes before spotting a parking garage. They ditched the sedan and found another vehicle, a nondescript gray hatchback. As they pulled onto the road again, Hawke spoke. "We make for the Austrian-Czech border. Cross by foot if we have to." Nadia raised an eyebrow. "You think they'll be waiting?" Hawke's expression was grim. "Count on it." Chapter 7. The Border Gambit. Austrian-Czech border, 2:45 hours. The road stretched ahead, deserted and shrouded in darkness. Hawke kept his eyes on the horizon, the dim glow of distant border lights reflecting off the damp asphalt. The stolen gray hatchback blended into the night, but they both knew it wouldn't hold up to scrutiny. Their pursuers were closing in, and the moment they hit a border checkpoint, every agency in Europe would have their descriptions. They had to cross unseen. Nadia studied the map on her phone. There's a smuggler's route about 4 kilometers west of the main crossing. Rough terrain, but no checkpoints. Hawke nodded. That's our way in. He veered off the main road, turning onto a narrow, unmarked trail leading toward the tree line. Time was running out. No way back. The hatchback bounced violently over uneven ground before Hawke killed the engine. We walk from here. They stepped out, the cold night air biting at them. Silence. No sirens, no approaching vehicles. But that didn't mean they weren't being tracked. Hawke motioned for Nadia to move. Stay low, keep to the trees. They slipped into the forest, their boots crunching against damp leaves. The smuggler's route was rumored to be used by traffickers and black market couriers. Dangerous, but far better than the alternative. As they pushed deeper, Nadia whispered, "What's the plan after we cross?" "Prague," Hawke said. "Bishop has an exfil waiting. If we make it that far." Nadia exhaled. No pressure. The hunters close in. 20 minutes into their trek, Hawke's instincts flared. He halted, motioning for Nadia to stop. Then, the sound of footsteps. Not theirs. Someone else was here. Nadia's hand went to her sidearm. Hawke gestured for her to stay still. He scanned the treetops, infrared drones, maybe. No hum of rotors. That meant boots on the ground. Then he saw them point 3 figures moving through the trees, scanning the area with night vision scopes. Not border patrol. This was Keaton's team. Nadia leaned in. "We double back?" Hawke shook his head. "Too late. We move. Fast and quiet." They adjusted course, weaving through the trees. But the agents were sweeping in a pattern, closing off their escape. Nadia glanced back. "They're hurting us." Hawke gritted his teeth. They needed an opening. Then, a voice cut through the silence. "Hawke!" They froze. One of the agents stepped forward. Gun drawn. "Drop your weapons. We don't need to make this messy." Hawke's mind raced. Options? They were outnumbered, but their position in the forest gave them one advantage. "Cover," Hawke whispered. "On my mark, go left." Nadia nodded. Then, in a single motion, Hawke fired. The agent dove for cover as the shot rang out. Nadia bolted left, disappearing into the trees. Hawke followed, keeping low as bullets tore through branches above him. The forest exploded with movement. Agents shouting, gunfire cracking through the night. Hawke and Nadia sprinted toward the border fence. A rusted, 5-meter-high barrier covered in razor wire. "Fence ahead!" Nadia yelled. Hawke reached into his pack, pulling out a climbing rope with a hook. .1 shot. The hook latched onto the top of the fence. "Go!" Hawke ordered. Nadia grabbed the rope and climbed fast. Hawke covered her, firing into the darkness. She reached the top, flipping over to the other side. Hawke followed. Seconds before another shot ripped past him, he landed hard on the Czech side of the border and no time to rest. They ran. Prague awaits. The sound of their pursuers faded as they pushed deeper into Czech territory. Hawke tapped his earpiece. "Bishop, we're in." A moment's silence. Then, "Understood. Safe house in Prague. I'll send coordinates." Hawke nodded. "We're on our way." Nadia exhaled, hands on her knees. That was close. Hawke's expression hardened. It's not over yet. They had crossed a border. Now they had to disappear. Chapter 8. Ghosts in Prague. Prague, Czech Republic, 4:20 hours. The narrow streets of Old Town were nearly empty at this hour, save for the occasional drunk tourist stumbling out of a late-night bar. A light drizzle misted the air, turning the cobblestone streets slick underfoot. Hawke and Nadia moved quickly, keeping to the shadows. Their escape across the border had bought them time, but not much. Keaton's team would be relentless. The safe house was in Malastrana, an old district across the river, tucked between centuries-old buildings. Bishop had sent coordinates to a nondescript apartment above a cafe. Hawke kept an eye on reflections in shop windows, scanning for tales. We'll stay here until we get exfil. Nadia nodded but kept her voice low. You trust Bishop? Hawke considered that. I trust that he wants me alive for now. Nadia wasn't convinced. This whole thing feels off. Someone inside your agency sold us out. Hawke's jaw tightened. She was right. Someone had known exactly where they would be. Someone had made sure Keaton was one step ahead. And Hawke was going to find out who. The safe house. The apartment was small, sparse. One window, a battered couch, and a cheap metal table. Hawke checked the perimeter before locking the door. He didn't expect the safe house to last long. It was just a place to regroup. Nadia sank into the couch, rubbing her temples. What's the next move? Hawke pulled out his phone and placed it on the table. Bishop will call soon. But first, he took apart the phone, pulling out the battery and SIM card. He wasn't taking any chances. Instead, he reached for a burner phone stashed in a cabinet and dialed. IT rang twice before Bishop answered. Tell me you're somewhere safe. Hawke kept his voice even. For now. A pause. Then Bishop said, listen carefully. You've got less than 12 hours before every agency in Europe locks down Prague. Hawke already knew that. Tell me something I don't know. Bishop's voice lowered. Keaton isn't the only one looking for you. Hawke's pulse slowed. Who else? Bishop hesitated. I can't confirm yet, but I intercepted chatter. A high-level contract just went out. A kill order. Hawke glanced at Nadia. Any idea who signed off on it? Bishop exhaled. That's the problem. The authorization came from inside your agency. A cold realization settled in. Someone high up wanted Hawke dead. Get me an exfil route, Hawke said. Bishop hesitated again. There's a problem with that. Hawke's patience thinned. Then fix it. I'm trying, Bishop said. But your agency isn't just tracking you. They've flagged any exfil requests under your name. Meaning, I'm cut off, Hawke finished. Exactly. Nadia frowned. So what do we do? Bishop's voice lowered. You need to go dark. Now. Hawke understood. No safe houses. No contacts. No digital footprint. For the first time in his career, he was alone. The setup. Hawke ended the call and turned to Nadia. We don't wait for exfil. We move. Nadia nodded. Where? Out of the city. Prague was crawling with surveillance. The longer they stayed, the more vulnerable they became. Nadia's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her expression darkened. What is it? Hawke asked. She flipped the phone around. A live feed of a news report. Hawke's face filled the screen. The anchor's voice was steady. Authorities are searching for 2 fugitives connected to an international assassination plot. Sources claim one of the individuals is a former intelligence operative. Then, Keaton appeared on the screen. These individuals are armed, highly dangerous, and have compromised national security. If spotted, do not engage. Report to authorities immediately. Hawke's fists clenched. Nadia locked eyes with him. They just burned you. Hawke exhaled slowly. He had expected something like this, but not so soon. Now, he wasn't just hunted, he was a wanted man. No way out. Hawke moved to the window. A black sedan sat parked across the street. 2 men inside. We've got company. Nadia checked. They don't look like cops. No, Hawke pulled his sidearm. They're waiting for us to run. They had 2 options. Point 1. Escape through the back alley and risk an ambush. Point 2. Take the fight to them. Hawke made his decision. He chambered around. Let's send them a message. Nadia grinned. I like the way you think. Hawke cracked the door open, breathing in the cool air. This was it. The next few minutes would determine if they made it out of Prague alive, and Hawke wasn't planning on dying tonight. Chapter 9. The Extraction Gambit. Prague, for 35 hours. The rain had picked up, hammering the rooftops and slicking the cobblestone streets below. The black sedan remained parked across the street, its occupants barely visible behind the tinted windows. Hawke crouched near the door, his mind running through possibilities. This wasn't just a routine surveillance team. Whoever had sent them was waiting for a kill shot. Nadia adjusted the strap on her holster, her eyes locked on the vehicle. If they're here, then we're already compromised. We don't have time for a clean escape. Hawke checked his magazine, then pocketed the burner phone. We don't need clean. We need fast. She arched a brow. What's the plan? Hawke's gaze flicked to the alley behind the safe house. We force their hand. She nodded. You want them to follow us? Not for long, Hawke said. I need a driver. A smirk tugged at Nadia's lips. I hope you're not implying I can't drive. Hawke grinned. Just don't get us killed. The chase begins. Hawke moved first, stepping into the open like he had nothing to fear. The reaction was immediate. The sedan's engine roared to life. The back door opened, and 2 men stepped out. Dark suits, earpieces, no hesitation. They weren't local law enforcement. Hawke didn't wait. He turned and sprinted down the alley. Behind him, footsteps pounded against wet pavement. Then, gunfire. A round smacked into the brick wall inches from his head. Hawke pivoted hard, pulling his pistol and firing 2 shots. Point 1 of the men dropped. The second ducked behind a dumpster. Hawke didn't stick around. He darted out of the alley onto a side street, where Nadia had already hotwired a stolen sedan. She threw the passenger door open. Get in! Hawke dove in as she slammed the accelerator. The tires screeched against wet pavement. Behind them, the second operative sprinted back to the black sedan. A moment later, their pursuers were on the move through the streets of Prague. The city blurred past in streaks of neon and rain. The roads were slick, the old cobblestone treacherous at high speeds. Nadia handled the car like a professional, weaving between narrow streets, forcing their tail to work harder. Hawke glanced at the rearview mirror. The black sedan was still with them. "They're not letting up," he muttered. Nadia barely reacted, gripping the wheel tight. "We need a bottleneck." Hawke's mind raced. "Take the Charles Bridge. If we cut across the river, we can lose them in Newtown." Nadia nodded, jerking the wheel left. The historic stone bridge loomed ahead, empty at this hour except for dimly lit street lamps. The moment their car touched the bridge, the sedan behind them picked up speed. "They're going for a hit," Hawke warned. The black sedan surged forward, trying to ram them. Nadia swerved hard, barely avoiding the impact. Hawke grabbed his pistol. "Hold it steady." She gritted her teeth. "Make it count." Hawke leaned out of the window, took a breath, and fired. The first shot shattered the sedan's windshield. The second hit the driver. The car spun out of control, smashing into the bridge railing. Nadia didn't wait to see the outcome. She gunned the accelerator, taking them off the bridge and into the maze of Newtown's backstreets. Finally, after a few turns, they lost sight of their pursuers, nowhere left to run. Nadia pulled into a dimly lit parking garage beneath an abandoned building. She killed the engine, letting silence settle. Hawke checked his weapon. "We won't be lucky twice." Nadia exhaled. "Agreed. So where do we go from here?" Hawke pulled out the burner phone and dialed Bishop. The voice on the other end was grim. "You're out of time, Hawke." Hawke didn't like the sound of that. "What's going on?" Bishop hesitated. "The agency flagged you as rogue. Interpol issued a red notice. Every intelligence outfit in Europe is hunting you now." Nadia's expression darkened. "They're burning us." Hawke tightened his grip on the phone. "Then we make our own way out." Bishop's tone dropped. "I might have something for you, but it's risky." Hawke smirked. "Risky is my specialty." Bishop sighed. "Meet me in Berlin. Midnight. I'll have a way out." Hawke didn't hesitate. "We'll be there." Bishop ended the call. Hawke turned to Nadia. "We need to disappear until then." She met his gaze. "And after that?" Hawke looked toward the rain-drenched city beyond. "Then we finish this." Chapter 10. Endgame. Berlin, 23:47 hours. The rain hadn't let up. Cold droplets spattered against the cracked pavement, mixing with the glow of streetlights reflecting off the wet asphalt. Jasper Hawke stood in the shadows of a crumbling warehouse, his coat damp, his muscles tense. Across the street, Checkpoint 17 loomed, a forgotten Cold War relic, now a dead drop location for clandestine exchanges. Beside him, Nadia adjusted the suppressor on her pistol. "Do you trust Bishop?" Hawke's gaze didn't waver from the checkpoint. "I trust him enough to show up." That's it. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. Right on time. Bishop stepped out, his trench coat billowing in the wind. He carried a small briefcase, his expression unreadable. Hawke and Nadia stepped forward. "You're cutting it close," Hawke muttered. Bishop exhaled. "We have bigger problems." He opened the briefcase. Inside, a set of forged diplomatic passports, 2 untraceable phones, and a data drive. "This gets you out of Europe," Bishop said. "New names, clean records." He hesitated. "But there's one catch." Hawke arched a brow. "There's always a catch." Bishop sighed. "They know you're here. You've got maybe 15 minutes before a full tactical team rolls in." Nadia's fingers tensed around her weapon. Then we need to move now. Bishop hesitated. There's something else. He handed Hawke the data drive. This is the real reason they want you dead. It contains evidence of a rogue faction inside your agency. They orchestrated the mission failure, not the defector. Hawke felt a slow, cold anger settle in his chest. Names? Bishop nodded. Everything's on there. High-level operatives. Some of the people who gave you orders. Hawke clenched his jaw. He had spent years believing he was serving a cause greater than himself. Now, the agency had turned into a breeding ground for corruption and deception. He pocketed the drive. Then we settle this. Bishop's face darkened. Jasper, if you take this fight, there's no going back. Hawke exhaled. There's nothing to go back to. The final standoff. A convoy of black SUVs appeared at the end of the street, headlights piercing through the rain. Nadia cursed. They're here. Bishop stepped back. Get to the train station. I have a contact waiting. Go dark. Hawke turned to leave, but something wasn't right. Then, he saw it point. One of the SUV's rear windows rolled down, and a laser landed on Bishop's chest. Hawke lunged. Get down. The shot rang out. Bishop staggered, blood blossoming on his coat. He hit the ground hard, gasping. Hawke fired 3 shots at the sniper's position, forcing them to duck. Nadia, cover me. She fired at the approaching SUVs, buying them seconds as Hawke crouched beside Bishop. Blood pooled around him. Bishop coughed. They won't stop. Hawke gripped his hand. I'll end it. Bishop gave a weak smirk. Then make it count. His breath faltered, then stopped. Hawke clenched his fists. He had lost allies before. Too many. But this time it was personal. Nadia grabbed his arm. Hawke, we have to go. The SUVs came to a stop. Doors flew open. Armed agents poured out, moving fast. Hawke didn't hesitate. He grabbed the drive, turned, and ran. One last move. Berlin Hauptbahnhof, 009 hours. The massive train station was a labyrinth of tunnels, platforms, and exits. Hawke and Nadia moved fast, blending into the late-night crowd. They had minutes before the agency locked down the area at T Platform 12. A freight train idled, ready to depart. Nadia scanned the area. Are you sure about this? Hawke checked the drive. There's a contact in Zurich. If we get this to them, the agency's rogue faction burns. Nadia nodded. Then let's go. They climbed onto an empty cargo car as the train lurched forward. From the shadows of the platform, a lone figure watched them. Then, he raised a phone to his ear. They got away. A pause. For now. The train disappeared into the night, carrying Hawke and Nadia into the unknown. But the fight wasn't over. Not yet.